Space Captain Timothy Adams had seen a lot of unbelievable things in his time with the Unified Galactic Fleet, but nothing could prepare him for when his human ship tore through space at mind-boggling speed, with a stunned alien transport in tow. When Adams and his small crew were assigned to escort the Pandronian transport vessel carrying sensitive cargo through treacherous territory, he knew it would be no easy mission. Captain Linux, the arrogant Pandronian commander, made his disdain for the human escorts immediately clear. "Try to keep up and stay out of our way," Linux said curtly as the two ships set off from the rendezvous point, with the Prometheus taking point to scout for danger. "We Pandronians have braved these unstable regions for generations. We hardly need humans slowing us down." Adams bit his tongue, knowing that arguing would solve nothing. He simply resolved to remain vigilant and do his duty to protect the transport, despite Linux's dismissive attitude. Linux's hubris was quickly put to the test when they entered the Shadow Gulf Expanse, a volatile sector known for deadly asteroid swarms and brazen raider attacks. Adams carefully monitored the Prometheus's long-range scanners, watching for any sign of trouble. Then the sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. A massive energy surge, a cloaked raider mothership decloaking, attack ships pouring out of hangar bays, an ambush. The raiders hailed the Pandronian ship, demanding they surrender their cargo or be blown out of the sky. Linux panicked. His ship only had light weaponry, nowhere near enough to fend off this many hostiles. "Human, engage the raiders. Buy me time to escape with my cargo," Linux shouted frantically over comms. Adams gritted his teeth. He wasn't about to risk his crew's lives for Linux's secret goods, but he also couldn't leave the Pandronians to be massacred. With attackers closing in fast and no backup coming, Adams had to make a split-second choice. It was crazy, reckless even, but it was their only shot. There. "Lock tractor beams on that transport," Adams barked to his crew. "Helmsman, engage the experimental warp drive. Full power." The Prometheus latched onto Linux's vessel. On the Pandronian bridge, Linux watched the human ship with a mix of confusion and outrage. Then, to his utter disbelief, the Prometheus suddenly shot forward at a ridiculous velocity, yanking the Pandronian ship along like a water skier behind a racing boat. Consoles sparked and lights flickered on the alien bridge as Linux grasped for stability, shock written all over his face. They were moving at speeds he thought impossible for any ship. In a matter of seconds, the raiders were left far behind as the human ship traversed light years worth of distance in mere moments. As the Prometheus and the Pandronian transport emerged from their dizzying warp jump, Captain Adams wasted no time in contacting Unified Galactic Fleet Command. He took a deep breath as the holographic image of Fleet Admiral Zhao flickered to life. "Admiral, we have a situation," Adams reported, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "The Pandronian transport was ambushed in the Shadow Gulf Expanse. We had to use the experimental drive to escape." Admiral Zhao's brows furrowed. "The drive is still in testing phases, Captain, but given the circumstances, you made the right call." She glanced at a datapad. "What's the status of the Pandronian vessel and its cargo?" "Both intact, ma'am. But Captain Linux has been less than cooperative, and I have concerns about the nature of his cargo." Zhou nodded. "Understood. Escort the Pandronians to Starbase Epsilon 9. We'll conduct a thorough inspection there and debrief Linux. Keep a close eye on them, Adams." "Yes, Admiral." Adams saluted as the communication ended. As the ships traveled side by side, Adams opened a channel to the Pandronian vessel. "Captain Linux, I think it's time we had an honest discussion about—" "Save your breath, human," Linux cut him off, his tone icy. "You've done your duty. Now let us be on our way." Adams bit back a retort. "Linux, we need to work together here. If there's something about your cargo, we should know." But the Pandronian had already terminated the link. Adams sighed. On the Pandronian bridge, Lennox hurriedly typed an encrypted message to his homeworld, fingers flying over the console. "Human interference. Cargo at risk. Send reinforcements to these coordinates." He hit transmit, a grim smile on his face. Upon docking at Starbase Epsilon 9, Adams oversaw the transfer of the Pandronian cargo himself. Linux strode up to him, eyes flashing. I demand to oversee the inspection of our property. Adams met his gaze unflinchingly. I'm afraid that's not possible, Captain. Standard security protocols. The cargo will be secure. You have my word. Linux seethed, but could do nothing as human technicians carefully moved the containers to a guarded hold. In a sealed lab, the technicians ran scans on the mysterious cargo. Their eyes widened at the results. Sir, one tech called to the supervising officer, you need to see this. Weapon signatures, unknown technology. I've never seen anything like it. The officer immediately contacted Admiral Zhao. Her face darkened as she read the preliminary reports. Lock down that cargo. No one goes near it without authorization. Raise the starbase alert level. Proximity alarms suddenly blared through the starbase. A Pandronian fleet had dropped out of warp at the system's edge. Adams watched the tactical displays, a sinking feeling in his gut. In the brig where Linux was being held, the Pandronian smiled slyly as he heard the distant alarm. Seizing his moment, he overpowered the guards and slipped out into the chaos of the starbase. He had to reach the cargo hold. Adams raced through the corridors with a security team, phaser drawn. They cornered Linux outside the hold. The Pandronian laughed. You have no idea what you've stumbled into, human. That device will give us power you cannot imagine. The power to dominate the minds of lesser species, like you. Adam's hand tightened on his phaser. It's over, Linux. Surrender. But on the interfaces, the Pandronian ships had armed weapons, locking onto the starbase. Return our captain and our property at once, their commander declared, or face the consequences. In the command center, Admiral Zhao gritted her teeth. The Pandronians had played their hand. Now she had to make an impossible choice, with the lives of her people and the fate of humanity and all alien species in the balance. The starbase rocked violently as the first volley of Pandronian energy beams tore through its shields. Alarms blared, drowning out the panicked shouts of personnel rushing to battle stations. Admiral Zhao's voice cut through the chaos over the comms. All ships, scramble, return fire immediately. Captain Adams, still facing down Linux, felt his comm unit vibrate. He glanced at the message. Direct orders from Zhao, assigning him command of a battle group to protect the starbase and its precious cargo. Linux sneered. Your pathetic defenses are nothing against Pandronian might. Stand aside, human. Adams's mind raced. Let Linux escape with tech that could enslave humanity, or risk all-out war by stopping him. The choice was clear. In one fluid motion, Adams drew his sidearm and fired. The stun blast caught Linux square in the chest. The Pandronian's eyes went wide with shock before he crumpled to the deck. Security team, take him into custody, Adams barked. I want him locked down tight. As guards hauled away the unconscious alien, Adams sprinted for the command center. The corridor bucked beneath his feet as another blast rocked the station. He stumbled into the bustling nerve center, immediately assessing tactical displays. Status report, he shouted. Sir, Pandronian ships have us outgunned, an ensign replied. Our fleet is responding, but we're taking heavy damage. Adams' eyes narrowed. Not for long. Patch me through to all ships. He outlined a daring counterstrike, coordinating fighters and cruisers to exploit gaps in Pandronian formations. As the human fleet engaged, Adams assembled a strike team. We're boarding Linux's transport, he told them. Whatever tech is left there, we can't let the Pandronians reclaim it. They fought their way across to the crippled alien ship, exchanging fire with Pandronian defenders at every turn. Adams' armor took multiple hits as he led the charge to the cargo hold. Inside, they found a nightmare, alien devices covered in blinking explosive charges. It's rigged to blow, Adams' second-in-command said. We can't disarm it in time. Adams made the call. Jettison it all. Now. They worked frantically, shoving cargo modules into the airlock. As the last one cleared the ship, a massive explosion lit up space behind them. The tide slowly turned. Human ships, more nimble and creatively deployed, wore down Pandronian forces. The alien fleet retreated, but not before inflicting severe damage to the starbase. Adams returned to find the station in disarray. Fires raged in multiple sections. Medical teams scrambled to treat wounded. In the brig, Lennox and his crew sat in sullen silence. Admiral Zhao met Adams on the ravaged command deck. "Well done, Captain. That was too damn close, but your actions saved a lot of lives today." Adams nodded, but couldn't shake a feeling of unease. As he looked out at the debris-strewn starfield, he knew nothing would be the same. The fragile peace was over. Humanity and the Pandronians now stood on the brink of a conflict that could engulf the galaxy. He turned back to Zhao. "Admiral, what happens now?" The aftermath of the Pandronian attack left Starbase Epsilon 9 in chaos. Smoke filled the corridors as emergency crews rushed to contain fires and tend to the wounded. Captain Adams stood in the wreckage of the command center, his uniform singed and torn. "We need answers," he growled. "Get Lennox to interrogation now." In a dimly lit room, Adams faced the Pandronian captain. Lennox sat cuffed to a chair, his usual arrogance replaced by a smug grin. "You have no idea what you've stumbled upon, human," Lennox sneered. Adams smacked his head on the table. "Talk. What's in that cargo?" Lennox leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Power beyond your comprehension. A device to amplify psionic abilities. Imagine it. The ability to dominate minds across galaxies." Adams felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The floor beneath them shuddered violently. "Warning. Power surge detected in cargo hold," the computer announced. Adams sprinted from the room, leaving Lennox chuckling behind him. As he raced through the corridors, the station rocked with explosions. Crew members stumbled past, faces etched with terror. He skidded to a halt outside the cargo bay, jaw-dropping at the sight before him. Crewman Jake Hendricks hovered in midair, surrounded by a maelstrom of swirling energy. Equipment and debris whirled around him like a tornado. "Hendricks!" Adams shouted. "What's happening?" The crewman's eyes were wide with panic. Captain, I can't control it." A wave of force slammed into Adams, hurling him against the wall. He scrambled to his feet as Hendricks' psychic storm expanded, tearing chunks from the walls and ceiling. Adams tapped his comm badge. "All hands, this is the captain. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." As chaos erupted throughout the station, Adams led an emergency team toward the epicenter. They ducked and weaved through corridors being ripped apart by Hendricks' uncontrolled power. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the din. "At last!" Adams whirled to see Lennox standing at the entrance to the cargo bay, eyes fixed on the psionic device with hunger. "Security team, stop him," Adams ordered. Phaser fire erupted as Lennox's newly freed Pandronian allies engaged the human security forces. Adams dove for cover, mind racing. The station was tearing itself apart around them. He crawled to a nearby console, fingers flying over the controls. "Computer, initiate warp core overload sequence." "Warning. Warp core overload will result in complete destruction of the station," the computer responded. "I know," Adams muttered. "Do it." As the computer began the countdown, Adams led his team in a desperate push toward the escape pods. All around them, the station groaned and buckled. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Hendricks. The crewman's face was contorted in agony as he struggled against the immense power coursing through him. "Hendricks!" Adams called out. "You can fight this!" For a moment, clarity returned to the man's eyes. With a primal scream, Hendricks turned his powers on Lennox and his forces. The Pandronians were swept up in a psychic whirlwind, hurled toward the growing singularity at the station's core. Adams and his team reached the last functioning escape pod. As they strapped in, Adams caught a final glimpse of Hendricks. The crewman gave a small nod before the psychic energies consumed him. The pod launched, hurtling away from the doomed station. Through the view screen, Adams watched as Starbase Epsilon 9 collapsed in on itself, swallowed by the artificial black hole. In the sudden silence of space, Adams slumped in his seat. The horror of what they'd witnessed burdened immensely on every survivor. As stars streaked past the view screen, Adams knew their ordeal was not nearly finished. The galaxy would never be the same. The crippled human vessel crawled through the void, its sublight engines straining against the vast emptiness. On the bridge, Captain Adams slumped in his chair, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. The low hum of machinery was punctuated by the occasional beep of consoles, a stark reminder of how alone they were. "Status report!" Adams called out, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her station, her face drawn. "Sublight engines at 62% efficiency, sir. At current speed, we'll reach the nearest human outpost in 47 days. Adams nodded, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. He glanced around the bridge, noting the haunted looks on his crew's faces. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional whisper or stifled sob. In the mess hall, Ensign Rodriguez stared at his untouched food. His hands shook as he pushed the tray away. "I can't eat," he muttered to his friend across the table. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Hendricks. The way he just—" His companion nodded silently, understanding all too well. The specter of what had happened at the starbase haunted them all. Days stretched into weeks as the ship limped on. Adams paced the corridors trying to boost morale, but his own doubts gnawed at him. The memory of the psionic device's power left him cold. Then, without warning, the ship's sensors blared to life. "Captain, to the bridge!" Chen's voice crackled over the comm. Adams raced through the corridors, his heart pounding. He burst onto the bridge, eyes wide. "Report!" Chen's fingers flew over her console. "Sir, we're picking up a distress signal. It's Pandronian." The bridge fell silent. Adams felt the weight of every eye upon him as he approached the view screen. A battered Pandronian scout ship hung in space, its hull scarred and dark. "Life signs?" Adams asked, dreading the answer. "Faint, sir, but present." Adams closed his eyes, wrestling with the decision. After a long moment, he spoke. "Take us in. Prepare a boarding party." The airlock hissed open, and Adams led his team into the Pandronian vessel. The stench hit them immediately, a sickly sweet odor of decay and ozone. They moved cautiously through darkened corridors, their flashlights revealing scenes of carnage. In the ship's bridge, they found the source of the horror. Pandronian bodies lay scattered about, twisted into unnatural shapes. Some bore signs of violence, others looked as if they had simply imploded. "My God," whispered Adams, second in command. "What happened here?" Adams approached a still-functioning console, its screen flickering with the last recorded log entry. As he watched, his blood ran cold. The log showed Pandronians writhing in agony, psychic energy crackling around them. One by one, they turned on each other, their newfound powers lashing out uncontrollably. The final image was of the captain, his eyes wild with madness and pain, screaming silently as the recording cut out. Adams staggered back, his pupils dilating. "We have to go, now." Back on their own ship, Adams called an emergency meeting. He looked out at the faces of his crew, seeing his own horror reflected back at him. "What we've seen today," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "is beyond anything we could have imagined. The Pandronian race is tearing itself apart, consumed by powers they can't control." He paused, the weight of his next words almost too much to bear. "We can't help them. We can't risk spreading this, whatever it is. Our only choice is to run." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Chen spoke up. "Sir, what about the survivors? We can't just leave them." Adams closed his eyes, feeling the burden of command more heavily than ever before. "We have to. For the sake of our own species. For every race in the galaxy. We have to." As their ship pulled away from the derelict Pandronian vessel, Adams stood alone on the observation deck. He watched as the alien ship grew smaller, knowing he was leaving its occupants to a fate worse than death. In that moment, staring into the abyss of space, Captain Timothy Adams felt the full weight of their situation crash down upon him. They had unleashed something they couldn't comprehend, let alone control. And now, as they fled towards the nearest human outpost, he knew that the real battle was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.